This is what the world very likely could have looked like if the Axis won World War II. More specifically, we're talking alternative history from Man in the High Castle. As you can see, the Japanese control the Pacific states, meanwhile the Nono-Germans have pretty much all of the US. I find it interesting that they took over North America before they took over, Asia, and then there's a second war between the Germans and the Japanese, which the Germans are going to win. Now, I don't always agree with everything that I see out of this alternative history, but that, I think, yeah. I think if it was just the Germans and Japanese left, the Germans probably would have beat them, considering how much land they had. So this is an Axis victory every day during World War II by the Italian mapper. Let's see how likely this could have actually happened. Now, I realize the series or the novel by the same name is more just wanting to focus on what the US would be like under the Axis. It's not necessarily going for the most realistic way they could have won World War II. Because I'm gonna tell you this right now, this occupation of the US would have been really difficult for them to have done. Maybe over the course of like 30 years after the 1940s. I do kind of like the Japanese US flag they gave us though. So we're starting in 1939, the beginning of World War II. As you can see, Germany and the Soviets are going to split up Poland. And we have now the first 6 months of the war where it was called the phony war. A lot of people say if France and Britain would have just invaded as hard as they could have knocked Germany out of the war immediately. Polish troops arrive in England. We also have the German Reich opening trade routes with the Soviet Union. Now at this point, obviously the Germans and the Soviets have a non-aggression pact. What I find very interesting about the Man in the High Castle scenario is they still ended up going after the Soviets. Like, I could maybe see Germany winning if they were really close with the Soviets, if maybe even the Soviets somehow joined their side. I know that in and of itself is very unrealistic, but they literally had a non-aggression pact as well as a way they were going to divide up Europe between the two of them. So that unholy alliance maybe could have been a thing, but Germany really wanted more oil, as well as there's a whole other explanation for why they had to invade the Soviets and start Operation Barbarossa. But here we go. France gets defeated in the Saar offensive. Germany prepares operation, so they're about to go around the lowlands, around the Maginot Line. If Finland pushing back the Red Army, so this is going to be very accurate to World War II for now, but there will be like strategic differences on how the Axis is going to win. That's coming up. Britain blockades trade routes between Germany and Norway, which is going to send Germany after Denmark and Norway. Finland surrenders, so that's the end of the First Winter War, but they're going to get back into it. Germany invades Denmark. Denmark literally lasts for 6 hours. They get all of Norway, and now Germany prepares to invade France. Now they're about to declare war on the Netherlands and Belgium and Luxembourg. There it is right there. They've invaded the lowlands. They're going up and around the Maginot Line, just like the French wanted, just like the Germans knew they had to do. Problem is they did it fast. Here goes France surrendering. Italians are now kind of, I don't know, I guess they're handling that. Whatever the Italians were doing in World War II, God knows. So they're about to actually go after Greece here. They have annexed Albania. There they have Syria. Romania is forced to cede that area back to the Soviets. The second Vienna Award grants Hungary the northern part of Transylvania. Bulgaria is extended. Now we have the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force taking great victories right now against the Luftwaffe. Again, there's going to be a moment where this timeline changes. Right now is pretty much the same. And I find the switch to be really interesting when we get there. Italy attacks Greece. They're going to need help, so the Germans are going to have to come through Yugoslavia. The Italians are defeated and pushed back in Albania. They're going to have to move through the Yugoslavian kingdom at this point. Hungary and Romania join the Axis. Right now, the United States are refusing to join the war. It's still January 1941. They're going to join later in this year after the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. Yugoslavia has joined the Axis, but then there's going to be a little civil war. Yugoslavia capitulates. Bam, Germany's going to come down there, defeat Greece. So far, pretty much everything's the same. The Iraqi government has capitulated. Germany invades the Soviet Union in so Operation Barbarossa begins. This is like, yeah, this is the hard part. From what I've read, the only chance Germany had in defeating the Soviet Union is if they knocked them out as soon as possible, which, to be fair, they had been knocking out all these other countries really quickly, so they probably thought they could just keep on doing that. But the USSR's sheer size, as well as things get awfully cold as you enter into Ukrainian territory, they definitely weren't expecting that part of it, and they didn't have to deal with that with the invasion of those other European countries. So they're going to obviously have immediate success starting out. Now, I don't know if this scenario has the Germans knock out the Soviets and then they grab the UK or what, but they're going to extend pretty far, just like they did in actual World War II, and they're going to definitely cut off the Soviets from like their oil refineries here north of the Caucasus Mountains. Finland's helping the Germans. Iran has been invaded by the Allies, Finland joined the Axis. The Weimar captures over 300,000 Soviet soldiers. Germany pushes into the north to the Soviet capital. Battle of Moscow begins. Leningrad resists German attacks right now. The Weimar Weimar. We're about to see Pearl Harbor also happen. Japan bump. There it is. Germany declares war on the United States with the C. That's fine. Germany suffers great losses as the winter arrives. I think in 1942, this is where the split in the timeline begins. This is what separates reality from the man in the high castle scenario. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how accurate this is really going to feel. They're going to definitely have to take some liberties here, and I think it's going to be kind of funny. The Finnish army holds its positions up there in the north. Meanwhile, Italy is being defeated in Libya. I love that even in the man in the high castle scenario, Italy is getting destroyed. The Eastern Front has become a stalemate. The Axis pushed back the Allies in North Africa. Germany continues to sabotage the Allies in the Atlantic Ocean with those U-boats. The Reich starts to recover from the winter because here it is. We are in summer 1942. The Soviet resistance continues. Weimar encircles 30,000 Soviet soldiers. The Axis push the Allies back. I guess they're talking specifically in Africa. Now, this part of the video is focusing mainly on Europe, which is kind of the important part since Germany is the focus of the man in the high castle scenario here. So we will be getting to Asia, which is also a pretty funny part of the everyday Axis victory, I think. Germany turns to the Eastern Front. So here's their moment right here. I think the only difference, this is how they win. The Weimar occupies the Caucasus. They're actually going to make it to the Caspian Sea. The Weimar arrive in Georgia. Rommel wins this battle of I don't even want to pronounce that. Axis forces reach the Suez. Turkey joins the Axis. That's a big one. Now, that did not happen. Is it Turkey that made them win? Obviously, throughout the vast majority of that conflict, they stayed neutral during the war. It wasn't until February 1945 where Germany finally declared the war. Germany would end up surrendering like 3 months later. Remember, the Turks, or the Ottoman Empire at that time, was Germany's ally during World War I. There's a whole plethora of reasons why they mostly stayed neutral in World War II, but I don't think this is like as insane as some of the other like leaps of faith we have to do in this alternative history for Men in the High Castle. This definitely would have helped them beat back the Allies in the Middle East, as well as get to some of these oil refineries that the Soviets had. Iran joins the Axis as well. This is like a holy war game already. The Red Army is being defeated in the Caucasus. Okay, now this right here, okay, this isn't that bad. Getting Turkey on your side, and we're also assuming that Turkey would actually be able to do something against the Allies and the Soviets, which they might not have been able to do anything. Iran also joining the Axis, which again maybe isn't too insane since they were occupied by the Allies. They eventually did declare war on Germany in 1943. So now I can see how the Soviet Union is going to begin to collapse here. Germany starts to win the Eastern Front. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I can kind of see that because they're going to run out a lot of precious territory and resources out of the Caucasus Mountain region. The Weimar reaches Kazakhstan. Turkmenistan leaves. So Kazakhstan's just left the Soviet Union. The Red Army is defeated in the Kola Peninsula, probably with the help of the Finns. Germany continues to fight relentlessly against the Soviets. Now, the UK is still sitting here pretty. They still chilling. And by 1943, I mean, the Allies were making advancements in Africa, and maybe they still will. I'm not exactly sure what this scenario is going to do with that. I don't know if the Spain invades Portugal. Oh, okay, so now also Spain. So they needed the help of Spain, Turkey, and Iran here. Again, Spain did have fascist Francisco Franco. He was thinking about joining their side. I mean, at this point, it looks like Germany's going to win in the East against the USSR. So I guess Francisco Franco maybe at this point would have just been like, oh, okay, well, why not? Let's go ahead and join now. That doesn't seem that crazy, because now their enemies are about to just be the UK and America. The United States are unable to support the Soviet Union at this point. Yeah, there's no more help getting them all that equipment. The Soviets get on the verge of capitulation. The Soviet Union has surrendered. I want to say right here that I feel like somewhat I could see happening. The invasion of America still is like pretty insane, and we're going to get to that part of the video. Okay, so now here's the Japanese side in 1941, right when they begin Pearl Harbor, because it's December. This was as big as the Japanese Empire got. Obviously, they have a lot of enemies to be fighting. Japan has secured the Marshall Islands. This is where, yeah, for sure Japan's going to struggle here. Unless the Germans somehow start providing them way more, because after the Soviets collapse, maybe they can get over through Siberia and help them out somehow. I don't know. Japan begins to besiege the East Indies. So they're going after Indonesia, Java, Borneo, Sumatra have all surrendered. Japan has arrived. British Raj has lost most of Burma at this point. There is fighting going on in South Asia, obviously. Japan occupies all of Papua. They're definitely going to have to knock out Australia and New Zealand. They're going to get really, really close. They're obviously taking a lot of liberties here. The United States are unable to stop the Japanese advance. I'm assuming the U.S. lost the Battle of Midway, which maybe this could have happened. And they had to have lost it like really bad. Keep in mind, maybe if Pearl Harbor was way more effective, and if there weren't 5 survivors of that attack, the West Virginia, Pennsylvania, California, Tennessee, and Maryland, maybe if Japan actually did just knock out the Pacific Fleet, then they could have made these advances. I don't know. Also, none of the aircraft carriers were there. Maybe if they happened to be present and hit completely and destroyed during the attack. Something to keep in mind, though, is that, you know, the American industrial power, they would eventually have rebuilt, but in the 1942, 1943 area, maybe Japan could have just had a bunch of success, because at this point, there's pretty much like no ships in the Pacific to stop them. Here they go taking over Hawaii at this point. Now, I don't know, maybe. Again, everything would have to probably go their way. While Japan is invading New Zealand, the United States take back Hawaii. Okay, yeah, so maybe they're rebuilding a little bit. They are gonna knock out New Zealand and more than likely Australia. New Zealand has fallen, especially as the UK is very concerned about, obviously, the Germans winning in the Soviet Union. Maybe the UK would let their Oceania colonies just fall. Japan takes back the Hawaiian Islands. I like that it goes a little bit back and forth. The Soviet Union suffers a surprise attack by Japan in the eastern Siberian region. Okay, bam. I don't know why they would do that, unless they got to the point where they didn't have to continue to push into China. Maybe they weren't worried about the Chinese. Maybe they had like a, what's that called? They like delayed it. They both agreed upon a mutual, like, we'll fight later. Maybe they would have done that. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Japan advances in Russia. I don't think Russia would really care about these lands being lost in the 40s, though. They're going to be way more concerned about the Germans. Soviet Union has been defeated in the Eastern Front. Okay, maybe that's why they invaded, because they knew it wasn't going to be that hard. Japan Empire continues to advance in Russia. Australia considers to sign a peace deal with Japan. Japan continues to rule the occupied lands. That's another way this scenario could have been maybe a bit more possible, is if the UK decided to peace out in the year 1940, because they considered it. They considered just being like, you know what, we're good. They're worried about actually being taken over. Maybe. Then there would be no advancements in the Ally or the African front, the Middle East. But in this scenario, they did continue to fight. The Soviet Union begins to sign for a truce. The Soviet Union then officially surrenders. So there's just complete chaos there. In the following months, Japan occupies the rest of China. In 1943, again, also, I think Australia just dipped out. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in South Asia, because I'm sorry, I don't know. They've just got so many people. I mean, I guess they did take over China, but the mass, can you imagine the sheer resistance they would be feeling in China and in India? Which is maybe why the Germans ended up taking Japan later in this alternative history. There goes British Raj falling. They did that so fast. I don't know. And then Australia dipped. This is what okay, we're taking some kind of liberties, some leaps here, I think. The German Reich has invaded England. I mean, it would still have been really, I don't know where the German Reich are getting the boats to invade England. I don't know what they could have done. Even if they had taken over all of the Soviet Union, like, where are their boats? Are they magically getting boats? Did the Japanese come all the way over? I don't even think the Japanese, I mean, the Royal Navy, I don't know. I don't think they could have done this. Especially, keep in mind, the US was helping them at this time. The Treaty of Berlin defines new boundaries for Europe, so Italy's getting a little piece, but they're definitely not getting that Rome that they wanted here. It's 1945, they're doing their whole, I mean, remember, like in World War II, they kind of had like big old pieces that they had occupied briefly of Russia during the Russian Civil War. Spain controls Portugal. Italy got like a bunch of Yugoslavia, the Axis members that were loyal are still on their side, which includes Turkey and Iran here, of course. That's Japan. Pakistan now becomes a free state. I don't know why Japan would give Pakistan their independence. That's probably not even a Muslim Pakistan. That's just people running away from the Japanese, more than likely. I think this is where things get crazy, because the Axis colonized South America, or occupy. Oh, Axis colonies in South America. Oh yeah, they've been taken over. I see. Japan reaches the Galapagos Islands. Interestingly, if they were to attack from South America, that'd be interesting. Germany invades simultaneously Greenland, Iceland, and the Falklands. At this point, I don't even think Germany would care. I don't think Germany would want to go through. I mean, this would be the hardest thing ever to go through the Atlantic. I mean, this would not be easy. They could probably take parts of Canada, maybe, but then the U.S. would. I think, well, it would be interesting. Like, does the U.S. just annex Canada? Japan wins in the Pacific. Germany drops it. Oh, okay. Germany drops it. That's right. It's 1945. It's December. Germany probably would have gotten their own bomb. This is assuming that we did not get our own bombs. Oppenheimer is unsuccessful. That German dude from the movie Oppenheimer, he figures it out. I don't know. So they're just gonna nuke the crap out of us. The American resistance is formed as the United States government surrenders. I think there are gonna be a couple of spots where the Axis invade the Americas by both sides. They're also in Peru, interestingly enough. I mean, with a bomb, maybe. Argentina, maybe they'd get us to surrender like the Japanese did. Argentina joins the fight along with the Axis. That's really funny. That's just a funny side note. The Germans occupy the eastern coasts of the United States and Brazil. They're doing this all at the same time, which is crazy. It's 1946. Oh wow, Italy did get a bunch of stuff in Africa. I didn't even realize that. The Axis continues to slowly advance. A stalemate is reached briefly for this. Okay, so this is where part of the scenario, I think, happens. The Brazilian army is slowly pushed into the Amazon rainforest. That'd be a great place to hide. if you're an allied member. Just go hide in the Amazon. Venezuela joins the war alongside the Axis. There would be, at this point, a lot more people joining. Maybe Mexico. Maybe they could get Mexico to join the Axis, because it's a very clear, like, Axis victory, more than likely. It looks like they're going to lose, so maybe they would. South African resistance collapses as Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru surrender. I love how they're doing this both. See, this is where the most unbelievable things I think are going to have to happen, obviously. They're divided between Brazil. I didn't realize that Brazil also gets divided in the Man in the High Castle scenario, but the Amazon is still, I think, kind of free. Germany continues to advance in North America as the resistance slowly crumbles. There's a small point where there's Americans that are like hiding in this part of the land, parts of Texas, parts of the Dakotas. The American resistance has brought on a point of no hope while the front line stabilizes. And this is how things are going to stay until, I guess, the 1950s or however long. Did they only drop one nuke, and was it just on DC? That's the question. If anything is going to get nuked, that's an interesting city. You don't want to do it in New York. If I'm like the Germans trying to occupy New York, a very powerful city, like I don't necessarily want to drop a nuke on it. You know what I'm saying? So maybe DC, I don't know. Okay, that's V-Day because the Allies were forced to surrender in North America in 1947. The Treaty of New York deals with the partition of the Americas. The global neutral zone is completed, and then we already saw at the very beginning of this video how the Germans and Japanese would eventually fight. Vichy France is granted Northern France the full Axis victory at this point, and this is not a very fun war to... Oh, we're in the 1950s, so it's 1950, it's 1960. This is, I think, when the Man in the High Castle series, I think on Netflix, begins, somewhere around there. The Axis is partitioned, obviously, between just Germany, Japan. It's funny, it's also Italy, but Italy is just not really given that much, and there it is. I feel like this could have happened. It's like a Game of Thrones scenario. You can do that, but you're gonna have to give it more time to have done that. Like invading both the Americas at the same time in 1947, after all that fighting, I think they would need probably a generation of more men to just use. So maybe in the 60s and 70s if they tried that, okay, possibly. But then maybe the US would have got nukes by then. Really fascinating video. I love this from the Italian mapper. Please go subscribe. So this apparently is what is covered in the book. Probably one of the most unrealistic stories, but still somewhat cool. Interesting to think about, but yeah. Big thanks to my patrons this month. Kansas was mentioned. KingBearHaze. JohnDenver. I can't sleep without Drew's voice. DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood. Archaeology. aPhatNarwhal. Carmel Saida. Pavlik. DOOCHBAGGINS.
Fredrik Tibblin.
Tambre.
Friend.
Sebby, if you hear this,
KirinoIsBestGirl.
I love you.
The Mexican
and
760.
ZaneyBoi.